So this carburetor, quadrajet, it's got a problem where it after you run it, when you get back, let it sit for a little bit, it boils the fuel out of the bowl. So, like if you stop for gas or something, you know, a short stop, it will it boils the fuel in the bowl and it, you know, pours it down into the cylinder, and so it makes it hard to start. You know, it floods it out, and so what we're gonna do is fix that problem. So the carburetor's just getting too hot. It's got the thin gasket on it. When I bought this a rebuild kit for this carburetor, it came with a you know, thin gasket and a thick gasket, and the thick gasket was pretty sorry looking at. I didn't trust it. It looked like it was made out of some pretty crappy gasket material, and so I just went ahead and ran the thin one, and I didn't have any problems when I built this motor. It was going to be an off-road use only, and I just stuck a 160-degree thermostat in it, and that was like 7 years ago. And I remembered I did that, and so I swapped it out later on for I can't remember if I put a 180 or a 195 in it. But when I did that, then you know, of course the motor's hotter, and that's when I started having the problems with it boiling the fuel. So I started looking around for a good thick gasket, and what I ended up with was this Mr Gasket carb heat dissipator, and this is made for quadrajet. What it is, you've got three thin gaskets and then 2 aluminum spacers. So you put a thin gasket, aluminum spacer, thin gasket, aluminum spacer, and a thin gasket. And so it spaces it up, I guess, 1/4 inch, and then these aluminum spacers dissipate the heat. And it'll still, it's not going to keep it running too cool or anything. It'll still be fine. So, but what I think I'll probably need to do is I need to I'm probably going to need a little bit longer bolts, and you can tell that these people have over tightened these bolts, and they've kind of dug into the carburetor top. You can see where it's kind of recessed in, and it's also kind of galled it up, so every time you tighten it down, it takes a little off of it. So I'm gonna get a little bit longer bolt, maybe a 1/2 inch longer, and then I'm gonna get some small flat washers to put right there to keep it from digging into the carburetor more. So I'm gonna pull these bolts out so I can take them down and get some longer bolts. So that's what we got to do first, and then we'll put the gasket on. So I just took some snips and trimmed off that little part that stuck out, and then cleaned it up with the little cleaned up the grinder a little bit. So now put that side over on that side. Which side works better? We'll do it like that. That's perfect. Having fun. Okay, so like I said, I trimmed this one up. I trimmed the gaskets up, and trim this spacer up. So we're ready to go put these back on. My high idle is sticking a little bit, so I'm going to see. I'd sprayed some stuff on here. I'm going to work with this a little bit while I get the carburetor off, see if I can see why it's sticking. Okay, one of the other things I'm doing while I'm working on the carburetor is I'm changing the throttle cable out. That's the way you do that. This little clip, this little plastic thing, you just push the throttle down and push that piece up out of the pedal, and then it's got, I'll show you the new cable in just a minute, it's got some little plastic spring clip things you gotta push in to get it pushed through the firewall. I've got half of it done. I think that almost, no. I think I got half of it. There it goes. Ouch. Put your helmet on. Put your helmet on. Alright. So here's so it's got these little spring clips. You push them in. The problem I was having with the other one is it's real stiff. The sheathing is real stiff, so it was kind of binding it a little bit. Plus, there's a piece of little plastic shroud on it. Let's just go ahead and pull it out. Oh, I got a tie wrap around it. This, see how that's broke out? It would get caught in there, so the throttle's also sticking. You can see where it, come on, focus. See how that pushed in like that? That's where it was getting caught, holding the throttle, because this is supposed to kind of, it would get caught kind of like that and be pulling the throttle open. Alright, and then it snaps in there. I'm going to have to get some snips though. Got a tie wrap around it. I got to undo the whole cable out. You can see how it's kind of in a permanent position, and this is, it slides decent, but if it bends any more than this, it really binds it. But mainly was this end piece, how that was broke. Just, it would get caught about like that instead of, see how it's supposed to do? It slides just like that when you give it gas. Well, boom, caught. You can see where they've been getting caught and pulling. I guess that would hold it down. I don't know. I think that would hold it, because that would be full throttle that way. I guess it would hold the throttle open, but it was still messed up. So the new one, I don't know. They did away with that. It's just, man, that one goes through real easy. So, probably not as good of a cable as the old one, but this one's not all messed up. So we just shove that through the firewall until it clicks into place. Got it through the firewall. I just reused the old gasket. This new one came with a rubber gasket, which would be fine, except it's got this big lip on it and it's too thick. Couldn't push it through and make it snap in. But the old gasket was fine. I put a little silicone on it just to make sure that it sealed up against the firewall real well. So now we just probably can't see anything. Let's see, there we go. Just get that over in the slot and push it into the accelerator. Might have to get some pliers and squeeze that in. Sorry, I'm gonna flip y'all upside down. Where am I? There we go. Locked into place. All right. So now, flip y'all back over. So now I'll put the carburetor back on, and then we'll snap this new linkage, new throttle cable into the bracket. Okay, so you can go gasket, spacer, gasket, spacer, gasket. And I just put, I stacked all of them and then put 2 bolts in it just to get them all lined up. And I'll pull the bolts out and I'll slip the carburetor on. Okay, so got my 1/2 inch longer bolts. I had to put just lock washers on top to keep it from digging into the carburetor like the old one did. The flat washers were too big around to clear everything, so that'll be fine. And like I said, they're 1/2 inch longer, and that gasket's 1/4 inch. So they're going 1/4 inch deeper, plus I put a lock washer. So I screwed them all the way into the block, or into the manifold, marked where the threads were, then put them in the carburetor, put the gasket on, and made sure that they wouldn't bottom out. And they don't. So they go a little bit deeper and they don't bottom out, so that's good. Got my new throttle cable hooked up. See how it lines up there and everything. And then it got my clip snapped into the bracket, double throttle cables, double throttle return springs on, and the transmission kickdown brackets on. All I got to do now is hook up the hoses and thread in this, tighten up this vacuum line for the booster. So just hook up the, adjust that choke a little bit. Just hook up all the hoses and we'll be good. Alright, let's go crank her up. Everything's hooked up, choke's hooked up, the AC compressor kick up is hooked up. Now a lot of people probably say like, oh, you got a lot of vacuum lines plugged up. Well, I do. Well, I've got 3 plugged up. because I'm not using the original air cleaner. I don't have all the lines hooked up to the charcoal canister, and alright, I got everything hooked up, so let's go crank it up. Fuel bowl's empty, so it'll be a long crank. Make sure the throttle's not binding. Man, that's an easy pedal to push now. Double check it out here. Yep, good shape. That's probably eventually going to wear into that, but we'll see how it holds up. Okay, throttle's not sticking. Crank it up.